brothers and fellow workers, time to talk again. We're going to talk about something you don't usually get from left-wingers like me, because it's usually they think it's the prerogative of the right to talk about freedom. Yeah, I think it's a contradiction in terms. They talk about right-wing libertarianism. That's a contradiction in terms. When they talk about freedom, they're always talking about freedom to do things, never freedom from things. I would maintain that a worker in the Soviet Union in the 1960s is much freer than a worker in Russia today, with the prospect of mass unemployment. You're not free if you're unemployed, and there was no unemployment in the Soviet Union. You're not free if you're illiterate. Everybody in the Soviet Union, except for mental defectives, was literate. They had a high. You're not free if you're ill. You're not free if you're sick, and you can't get treatment in America. They leave you to lie in the streets if you're a down and out like I was. I've experienced a lack of freedom in the strictly physical sense of having been in jail, but my mind was never in jail. And I am a free individual, and I think it's time we took the word freedom away from the right wing, because they don't really mean it anyway. You know, when they talk about freedom and rules and regulations and red tape and bureaucracy and the nanny state, they've got all that big brother, you know, they are deceitful. All these things are rules and regulations which they wish to avoid, at the same time as they are always complaining about the lack of law and order to protect private property, because that's all they're interested in. And accumulating more and more private property and making less and less rules for them to follow. When Margaret Thatcher came to power, deregulation was the cry, and deregulation was what happened, for instance, in the building industry. Well, I'm sure Wimpy's and all the other big companies made lots more profits when Maggie Thatcher was in power. But a lot of poor working men died on building sites as well because of the lack of regulation and safety. We've often talked about they dislike the safety culture, you know, and all the rest of it. Of course they do, because they're well healed, and a rich man has got all the freedom in the world, you know. I'm not free to go to America tomorrow. One, because the bastards probably wouldn't let me in, and two, because I haven't got the money. You know, so you've got to have money to be free. So don't fall for all this guff about the free world. It's anything but. The most powerful person in anybody's life is not their MP or their Prime Minister, but their employer. He can sack you at a minute's notice and destroy your life, and he's elected by nobody. He's free, mate, but you're not. You know? Don't let you fall for this guff about freedom and democracy. We do not live in a democracy. We have class rule in this country. The same 7% of people, generally the privately educated, but not always, but generally the privately educated, people who generally make money from investments, that is without working. Money works for them. And it applies to, if you own money, you get more on it, you get interest in the bank, and if you owe money, you have to pay back more than you owe. It's a constant game played by the capitalist class. And let's not be fools. All wealth, I repeat, as I've repeated on other videos, all wealth is created by labour. There is no other way. It's all smoke and mirrors. I've met very intelligent people who are convinced that we wouldn't have a table unless an entrepreneur had the idea to make a table. You know, they had tables in Russia, believe it or not, without any entrepreneurs. People walked about dressed up in clothes in Russia without any entrepreneurs. There was no industry at all in the Soviet Union in 1917. And yet 20 years later, they were able to take on Nazi Germany and defeat them. Stalin sucked them in. He sucked them in so they couldn't get out again. And that's what happened to Napoleon as well. Stalin was very wise. He directed a swear word in the capitalist lexicon. He directed industry, the tank factories to Siberia, where the Germans might be able to reach them, but they wouldn't get back. And that's what won the war at Kursk and Stalingrad, was the building of tanks and socialist planning. Rules, regulations are what protect us from the rich. And if that's what rules and regulations do, then rules and regulations are a good thing. As I'm fond of saying, if you don't like rules and regulations, go and live in Somalia. They haven't got any there, you know. But if you call that freedom, mate, then you're up a fucking gum tree. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains and the world to win.